Okay, this is Satisfying Cactus Sprint 5 review. This was a 3-week sprint with a one holiday day. We completed 151 story points. We have about 80 in progress, and we have 40 to the left to do. This is actually pretty good compared to previous sprints. We actually I think got more. Usually we have about a 50-50 split. We got better than that this time. And if we look at absolute numbers, we actually completed about 2/3 of the tasks, if independent of story points. And a lot of these in progress things I think are pretty close to being done. So I want to switch over to Jira now and look at this. If we look at all issues, we have 101 issues total. I'm going to just move through the epics. The first one was aligning virtual and physical environments. The task, this is one of mine, it's vigor provisioning doesn't happen on physical nodes. This is dependent on the 1650 thing. I think this might end up waiting till 6.0, but it involves network setup on the head node. So that's just a dependency issue. I don't think we have anything for container-based orchestration that was actually added to the sprint. We have other things related to Kubernetes that I think we've worked on, but I don't think I've put into this epic. Deployments and build automation. Luca?
Yeah, so the automated deployment and the service provider network successfully completed, and we moved also forward on that. We have a job that automatically configures the router, and we'll soon have by today a job that creates a VSG automatically as well. What else? Well, with this, as you know, we discover many bugs, important bugs, and as a result of this, we're sending out an ONOS 110.11. Also, we upgraded the version of the OFDPA package from EA4 to a patch version of EA4 on Cord 4.1. And this in master is already solved by EA5. There are some patches, Matteo can elaborate more on those later on the Tosca part to configure the VSG. And that's it, roughly.
Yeah, so the patches, since they are not listed in Jira, were basically just a cherry pick of some bug fixes in the Tosca engine from master to 4.1 that we needed to use the new Tosca engine.
Okay, thanks, Luca and Matteo. We didn't have anything for documentation. Moving on, dynamic loading and service and provisioning services. Scott, it looks like most of these are your items.
Yeah, so starting with the first one, fault tolerance, that was making the dynamic load system tolerate failures in Xproto that are submitted, so that rather than bringing the whole system down, it would remain up, and you could later replace your failed Xproto with good Xproto. Migrate RCord services from static to dynamic load. That was the whole RCord stack. So OLT, BSG, vRouter, address manager, the RCord profile, all that stuff has been migrated to the dynamic load system. Just a point of clarification, migrating these meant updating the service repositories. So they're now using the dynamic load portion of the core code. There's still outstanding tasks in the build system to kind of put that separation between bringing up the platform and then later bringing up the services. That's not covered as part of that topic. Make migrations doesn't handle modeling changes. That was an issue with the migration support in the core, which always removed all migration scripts before regenerating them. I think that fit our previous pattern where we would typically destroy everything. Whenever doing an upgrade, we're now moving to a situation where we actually do support upgrades, so we can't destroy everything anymore. So that's working. Run synchron. Well, that's Mateo's. Let me go on with mine. Implement unload models call. So I added an unload models API call that does the opposite of load models. It gets these things out of the core. Sometimes Tosca times out waiting dynamic load. That was just a matter of retries being too few and with too little delay between them in platform install. Synchronizers with no policies, no sync steps should exit after loading models. So we've modified the synchronizer behavior to account for the RCord profile synchronizer that has no sync steps and no model policies, but it does load models. So rather than having that thing sit there and do nothing for eternity, it will now gracefully exit after it's loaded its models. And then synchronizers fail to connect to the core if modeling is not up. This was a bug that Zach discovered mid-week. That's been fixed.
And while cord 2527 run the synchronizer in the local scenario, since we moved the model onboarding from the core builder tool to the synchronizer, we now need synchronizers to run in every scenario, otherwise we don't have the models. And that was a small patch to run the synchronizer in the local scenario. I think we should at this point completely remove the mock scenario, because that was not running the synchronizer, and at this point it won't work.
I agree, Matteo. Can you make a ticket for that? And maybe we should discuss that at stand-up, but I think that's the right decision.
Yeah, I'll make a ticket so we keep track of it.
Okay, thanks. Items that weren't finished in dynamic loading. Andy, do you want to go?
Yeah, so all these tickets that have my face next to it, I guess 2511 is the big one here. So the push here was to separate out building the base platform and then later on onboarding a collection of services for the profile, and that didn't get completely done. I guess a couple of reasons are there's a bunch of dependencies in terms of the dynamic service onboarding being there. Also, I guess the work that Matteo has been doing recently to try to allow onboarding a single service dynamically. So because of these dependencies and because of also MCord MWC work, I didn't get done with that. So this will get pushed, I think, to the next release. I guess it's possible. No, it'll get pushed to the next release.
Yeah, regarding 1259, that was mine part here. We have a part of it. We can now define in the profile services that support dynamic onboard, but is still missing some toolchain to build and run a synchronizer after the platform has been deployed. That I think is the most important feature in the dynamic onboarding. But again, I think it will need to be postponed to 6.0 because we're going into feature freeze, and both Andy and I will be busy with MWC next week, so I think.
Or maybe we can think about like a 5.1 or something then.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
that would make sense to complete the dynamic.
Yeah, like a feature, a new feature point release.
So 2477, this is the core models for dynamic load. That probably needs to be retasked as a 5. It's probably bigger than a 3. That just kept getting pushed off because some of these other small bugs and stuff took precedence. That is my next task to start working on, so I'm going to see if I can get that done next week before we call feature freeze. And basically what that involves is deciding whether or not to remove the core models from Core Builder and get them integrated with the dynamic load system, deciding exactly how to do that. I think there's a few unanswered questions there, and that's why that's probably more than a 3. 2478, it was a low priority item. Tosca container should restart. Right now, it's forced to restart by the core. It kind of goes in via Docker API and forces it to restart. It'd be cleaner if that container did its restart automatically internally when the modeling changes. That's a low priority item because it's working the way it is, but this would be a cleaner way to do it. So that'll probably remain as a low priority item until we get the time to take care of it.
Yeah, I think that will cause some issues once we move to Kubernetes.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also, when we do move to Kubernetes, there's also a Chameleon issue because we've had to do the same thing with Chameleon, forcing it to restart to reload the models. And look in and see if that's still necessary as the Chameleon code base, matured so that's no longer needed. And if it is needed, then figure out how to address it.
Yeah, I believe that in general, Xlash should not interact directly with the Docker demo.
Yeah, I think that's a good discussion we should probably have soon for the Kubernetes work. Thanks, Andy and Scott and Matteo. I'm going to move on to eCord. And I think there wasn't anything in the sprint for eCord now, or actually there's nothing that was done on eCord. There are a few items that were not done.
Quick question, is someone recording the meeting?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
There are some eCord bugs that I fixed, but I think I put them in the maintenance sprint rather than the eCord sprint.
Okay.
I think eCord is currently paused because Andrea has been pulled on fabric work and Mark is busy with ODTN and Mark's finished.
Yeah, I agree with that, Matteo. Unfortunately, there was some, other commitments. So most of this work has not been done. Thanks for the fixes that you guys put in place for supporting in 5.0. That was great.
Okay, we're going to move on to expanding QA coverage. I think things that are done.
Okay, so I can go over these tasks. So the first one here, aligning core tester with the documentation guide. So the core tester framework, the core tester container that was created a while back through the Sienna QA guys, but for a while they've been off of it. So we had to align that to properly align with the guide that we give to our users, so that we can, so the way we deploy and configure the pod post installation and the way we go about testing it aligns with the guide. So they were doing a lot of things like bringing down ONAS cord and then installing some of their Sienna apps on ONAS and reconfiguring ONAS cord and then conducting this test. So what we went ahead and aligned core tester container to fit with what we say in the guide in terms of how to configure and deploy the pod. So we went ahead and did that, and so now the core tester container is ready to conduct additional testing, such as some data plane testing and stuff. So that was done. And then core 2368, automate eCord global configurations. So on our QCT3 pod that we deploy eCord global on every night, it's now doing the additional configuration steps. Although we don't have local sites connected to it right now, we don't have any additional pods that that connect to it as a local site, because we deploy eCord local on that same pod just after eCord global is deployed. So, at any point when we get an additional pod, it'll be ready to connect connect local sites to the global site automatically. And then core 2425. So we resolved the Flex node build issues that we had in the Flex pod, and so it's now the MCore build job on Flex node is ready, and it's created. 2472. So Suchitra created a soak test for the cord environment. I believe she's running it on one of the Flex pods. So she created basic tests to validate things like running longevity. Well, on a long running cord pod, do operations, every few hours or every like once a day in terms of bringing up VSG instances, bringing them down, collecting important information on the pod, look at the memory usage, Docker stats, see if any Docker thing is restarted or ran out of memory. So she has that test in place. And so while I'm on that topic, the task that was missed this sprint was to validate the SOAP test and conducting the SOAP test, because she was running into a lot of build issues this sprint, so she wasn't able to thoroughly, test the SOAP environment, having a pod run continuously for a week and stuff. So I think that she plans on intending on doing that beginning of next week. And the last task here that was done for 2572, we needed to add additional configuration steps on our QCT pod 1 to run some data plane testing because we don't have a vRouter in that pod. So we had to add the VSG gateway route into the head node to forward traffic, internet traffic from the VSGs. So we can now start conducting end-to-end testing on pod 1, on QCT pod 1. So that was done.
Okay, thank you, Kailash. We're going to move on to Fabric features and improvements. I'm going to go the done ones first. Andrea?
Sure, I can speak to those. So basically, I started developing, and there was an integration of this trellis troubleshooting tool, short T3. So if you see T3 somewhere, it's trellis troubleshooting tools. And the idea is that right now in 112 and master, you can submit, for now through CLI, a command that traces a packet through the network by looking at the flow rules and the topology which is stored in ONUS. So you describe the packet to the selector and issue this command, and it will give you the possible outputs of this command and printing you the flow rules that hits and the groups and the different devices. So those are the two tasks that you see: initial basic infrastructure and initial implementation. And there's already some testing of this and a wiki page if anybody is interested. And that's it.
Thanks, Andrea. Is Pierre there?
No, not really. I can kind of speak to what he's doing because I know what he's doing, but if Charles or Surf prefer to do so, I'll let them do it.
We don't have anyone here.
Oh, I see. Okay. So basically, what Pierre is doing is he's testing multicast on the trellis, and in the meantime, dealing with some bugs that he has seen, and also he adds. So those are the three bugs that you're seeing. Basically, there was some multicast. He was testing multicast, and he saw some these issues and fixed them. Then he also extended the trellis.py script that we have in the trellis repo on GitHub to set up a Mininet environment. He extended it with the dual links between Leaf and Spine to better simulate some scenarios that require dual links.
Okay, great. There are a few things that didn't get done here, and it looks like most of them are Pierre's.
So Yeah, those are in progress. There are actually also 2 mine, so I'll speak first to mine and then I'll speak to Pierre's. Basically, so mine are a couple that are actually under review. So I hope to get them in like in the next very few days. So they're just just because I pushed them fairly late and there was not time to review them. The Pierre ones are related to multicast, and there are some that are still in progress. And they're mainly in progress, especially the buckets correction one, the forwarding to all the syncs, and the device down event. There's also a patch for the first one, the 2534. So most of these are actually already mostly done, I would say.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. M-Cord. Matteo?
Yeah, so basically, as now in the service graph, when you boot XOS, you can display virtual machine and networks connecting them. You need to press some shortcuts. You can, just as I remember, you can see the shortcut just pressing question mark in every page. So if you need to debug connectivity between VMs and see where they are attached, this tool can be useful.
Okay, is Wujang there?
He's not, and Ping Ping is not here either. So rather than go through all of their items one by one, let me just try to summarize what all of these were about. So for the M-Cord 5.0 release and also for the MWC demo, we created a bunch of new services. The HSSDB service running Cassandra, the HSS service, and the MME service. And so those are new services that were implemented and tested. There's also some updates to the SGPWC and U playbooks based on new images that we got from Intel for the NGIC data plane. So there were lots of updates to services and VNFs, and so a lot of the work was getting all that developed and tested. The other big piece of work, particularly for the MWC demo, was integrating the hardware. And so I know this is where Ping Ping spent a lot of her time trying to get the eNode B talking to the MME, and also the phones talking to the eNode B, and there was a lot of frustrations there. I don't know the exact status for where all that stands. I think she made some pretty good progress based on the things that are crossed off here, but I'm not sure. There might still be more work to do before everything is ready for MWC.
Andy, quick question. Is the Intel MME and HSS integrated? They're working through some issues, right? So has it all been fixed and finalized? So I don't know the status of if everything is actually working together. Okay, thanks.
Sapan, did you want to?
Yeah, one more piece of work here was getting multiple EPC service instances running simultaneously. So Wujung contributed to that for the MWC demo, figuring out the configurations and playbooks that were needed in the MWC EPC blueprint. So the main, one part of it was just figuring out if it worked and testing it by bringing up multiple EPC instances, running different blueprints. The other part was dealing with the requirement that the behavior of a service depends on the blueprint that it's part of. So specifically the playbook that it runs, how it configures the VNF, but also the configuration parameters that it extracts from its peer services in its service graph vicinity. So this is, this doesn't boil down to, so the way we set up these service graphs is that there's a set of blueprint configurations in the EPC service, right? And when the EPC service sets up a service graph, every component service has a backlink to the EPC service. So the problem of a service figuring out its blueprint, unfortunately, doesn't boil down to simply accessing the EPC service and looking for the string that identifies the blueprint, because you can create service graphs without the help of the EPC service, right? So you could log into the GUI, create the exact same topology, service graph topology as the MCORD 5.0 or MWC blueprint, and then its component services should work as expected, right? So what needed to be done here, and it's done basically, is that the component services also have a specification of the blueprints that they can run as part of, and they discover the blueprint by looking at their graph vicinity. Much of this code was actually already working, but in very ad hoc ways, and in a blueprint there were blueprint specific hard codings. So now it's cleaned up and it's completely generic. So when one of these services has to run, it queries its service graph vicinity for a blueprint. It doesn't matter if you set that service graph up via the EPC service or via the GUI or via the API, or a combination of the above. So yeah, this. So I guess the only thing that needs to be done now is just testing it and making sure that it plays well with the rest of the work that's been done with MWC. Yeah, so that's it for me for MCORD.
Thanks, Sapan. Is Demetrius or Jianhao there?
Nope.
Okay. I'm assuming that their issues were that they solved were related to MWC. Things that didn't get done in MCORD.
So I can talk to some of these. So the first one, 2414, is what Sapan was just talking about. So for the MWC demo, we want to show two EPCs running simultaneously, and our focus this week was getting the first EPC working. And again, I don't know the status of that. Is it completely working or not? But since, as far as I know, we didn't get it completely working, we haven't moved on to adding the second one and trying to get that working simultaneously. I guess that is probably the only one I want to try to. Oh, so 2503, build the video stream app image. That one is actually done. That's another service we integrated this week. The internet emulator service brings up a video server in a VM. So that is done.
Okay. Matteo, can you talk about, do you have anything to say about 2505?
Yeah, that is still in progress. Is the task that kept pulling me back and forth between the platform and MCORD. Basically, there is this application in ONOS that will enable a run slicing in MCORD, and this is about writing a service to configure this application. this service will later be configured by ONAP. So there are two sides of it. Luckily, we are not in charge of doing the ONAP integration, but just to expose northbound interface. So I found that there was something. Someone started this F for back in the days of 2.0. So I started from there and migrating it to 5.0. It's a pretty big step.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to maintenance. We're going to go with the done ones. So a lot of these were things that we encountered during development. So 2603 scenarios that don't define head node fail to build. That was if you didn't define the head node variable when you're using one of the new, after we integrated some of the 1605 patches, there was a build failure. 2598 images. The local scenario wasn't updating images and wasn't copying things over for them to be rebuilt in that case, so that was fixed. The cord config milestones, this was something that was discovered by, I'm forgetting his name, but he works with David Bainbridge. You could have, if you were running cord config multiple times, you could end up with gen config directories inside gen config directories, which didn't work. 2542 image builder removes tags that just applied. This was the case where if you had two images or two Docker images with the same name, if you track and you applied a tag, you might actually be removing the tag because of the way the Docker tagging works. So this fixed that. And then the VA and VN synchronizer listed twice in the Docker images. That was just an error that was introduced a while ago where an image was listed twice. Andy?
So 2512 and 2494 are both just spending a little time looking at Jenkins jobs that were continuously broken and getting them up and running.
Okay, Kailash?
More to say there, really.
Okay, yeah, so core 20, is that 2526? Yeah, so for a while, on one of our pods, PCT pod 1, the core 4.1 build during cleanup was failing. Although in our build script, we catch that error, and if, we continue on, but in the make build file, during the teardown or during the cleanup, if Vagrant Destroy failed for whatever reason on that particular system, it doesn't, it wasn't continuing on with cleaning up the rest of the environment, such as cleaning out the core profile. So in the master bench, I don't know, at some point after code 4.1, we cleaned that up and we allowed it to continue. So the fix there for that particular pod was just to get that code fixed in code 4.12 in the make file. So that resolved that issue on that particular pod.
And cord 2541, while playing with the local scenario, we realized that the GUI was not working. So that was just a proxy issue, and it has been fixed. On this, I wanted to add just one thing, because when I mentioned that around, a lot of people say, oh yes, we have noticed. If you notice something broken in the GUI, please let me know. And 2576 was a bug that Andy found, that the GUI was pushing a timestamp forward in the future, then preventing the synchronizer to run. And turned out that we were storing UTC timestamp in the core while the Redis events was considering them to be time zone based, so was changing them in the future.
We just saw it now on the deployment, probably the same problem on 4.1.
I'm sorry.
Right. So did you backport the bug fix to?
No, I can backport it.
But why aren't we backporting bug fix by default?
That's a good point.
So 2562, that was there was an eCord global sample that configures eCord global with sample parameters that activate the synchronizer and such. That Tosca recipe was written for the old Tosca engine, so I updated it to the new Tosca engine. And then 2590 was the VNAS synchronizer was failing. It seems that the models were slightly newer, using foreign keys and such, whereas the synchronizer was expecting like string names and to do lookups. So I think at some point the models got further ahead than the synchronizer, so I brought the synchronizer up to compliance with the modeling. Those two together should have eCord Global in the same status it was in at 4.1. So I would consider it now 5.0 compliant.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Matteo?
So that is still in progress. Basically, there is this view URL field that is related to the previous UI that is still around in some Tosca recipe. It's not really a bug, but we should remove it because it's not used anymore, and it is both in the Tosca recipes and in the Xproto definition.
Okay, the next two are mine. 2185 is Image Builder to build images for local repos, not in the manifest. So that's to let people who bring their own service and it's outside of the cord source tree to be able to build that. I am part of the way through working that, but it's how we specify the paths is we probably need to have a discussion about that. And how those sort of external services are included in the code base, or not in this case. And 1650 is refactor interface and bridge handling. A good portion of this is in the parts that are supposed to happen in platform installer and in the RCord profile. This also lets us unblocks a bunch of the Kubernetes work, which required multiple nodes set up and network together without mass. So I still have to get this into eCord and mCord. That might not, especially for mCord, might not make it till 6.0. So that's that. Let's move on. Offline limited access install. We didn't have anything. RCord. Jono?
Yeah, so actually this one is done. We have the document now. There's going to be some small changes to it to incorporate some new changes in Volta, but yeah, the basic document is there.
Okay, thanks, Jonah. Refactor build deploy. This is an item that I have to get the Docker registry up outside of. Right now, it's being brought up by mass, but it needs to be brought up by platform install, and it'd be nice to have security and authentication support on it. That's also for supporting Kubernetes, and there's a patch set that's in flight for that. Unit testing framework. This is also one of mine. Setting up SonarQube. SonarQube is working right now. The problem is we don't have jobs created for it in Jenkins, and we're kind of waiting on the Linux Foundation to get Jenkins job builder up before we apply those to across all of the.
Yes, and I have good news on that. So I'm still waiting for the final okay, so please don't use it now. But if you go to jenkins-new-opencore.org, you'll see that there's something. Again, don't use it because I need to wait for their final confirmation. They're doing some tests before giving the environment to us.
Okay, that's great, Luca.
Yeah. The other big thing is that we need to make, before transitioning to that Jenkins, and this would be up to me, I need to make sure that the pod build jobs, the big pipelines jobs we have can work fine with these new Jenkins. Once that's confirmed, we can start to use it.
Okay, that sounds good. Upgrade to Xenial. This is something that actually the 1650 patches. Let RCord pod test run on PrepPod. PrepPod is basically the cord profile, but with all the nodes pre-installed with Ubuntu, and then it installs. It basically is a non-mass setup. So this actually runs the pod test. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes less time than running the cord profile, but it's a good validation that we're headed in the right direction. And the reason this exists is we didn't want to try to do a big bang migration of XOS, ONOS, OpenStack, Mass, and whatever else we happen to have all at once. This lets us do just the upgrade of the head node software more slowly. Let's see if we move down. All of these are items that I think Gopi made that are probably going to end up happening in 6.0. Issues without epics. So Matteo, you want to go?
Yes, so the first two are related to the Tosca engine. We finally migrated all the recipes to use the new one. So we got rid of the old one, and we removed all the leftover of the monitoring service implementation, since Acorda is being completely rewritten from scratch. They were useless. And the last three, so 2547, we were using, so in the XS core, there was a knowledge about registrator and console. We removed that, and we are using the Docker Compose links instead of the IP to locate the database. That was in preparation for Kubernetes. We had a bug in which Tosca was not reporting a meaningful error when you were trying to add a non-existing property to a model. So now it brings a better message. And the last one, I realized that the Swagger API generation in the documentation was broken since we moved around the Xproto. And now there is a script that recursively look into the directories to look for all the Xproto file in there, no matter where the location is. So it shouldn't broke again.
Okay, thanks, Matteo. Sapan?
So the Elk Stack stuff actually got done in the previous sprint. Didn't touch that in the sprint. The other thing is the I guess there should be an Xproto static checker item somewhere. Maybe not done.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one. So if you could bring that up, that has a bunch of sub items. There were 3 parts to this. So the first part is really preparing the ground for static checking and error reporting in a way that highlights, where an error is and passes the appropriate context around, so you can do static checking. That was probably the most laborious part. So there were some corners that we cut, because of expediency when we first implemented the Xproto parser. That was the most laborious part, and that's done. So, if you've used the Xproto tool in the past, you may have noticed a bunch of issues having to do with it not exiting cleanly if it discovers an error. Now it exits cleanly, clearly indicates the place at which an error occurs, and actually highlights it. And then there's a temp file issue that would cause garbage information to be printed on the screen. And then there's actually a really bad bug involving shift reduce conflicts. So the interpretation of certain constructs in Explorer would depend on the ordering of those constructs. And again, the way we worked around that was to put parentheses at the right places. Now that's fixed, and it should never bother anybody going forward. So I said there are 3 parts to this. This was the first part. The second part involves actually putting together the checking functions and infrastructure so you can invoke it via XOS Gen X. That's in pretty good shape. This has been happening on the back burner with, so this is in good shape. I expect to be done with this in short order. And the last part is actually encoding the rules for static checking. And once part 1 and 2 are done, part 3 is doesn't actually require any Explorer expertise or any programming hacking. It's really a question of figuring out what the rules are and encoding them. And the rules we've listed out, and people there's a design document somewhere with a long list of rules that we want to encode. But all this is getting done in short order. That's it on this point.
Okay, thanks, Apan. 2540 is mine. That's if you use the collect diag target, it generates a diag folder on the head node. This is I added items to get more data out of Open vSwitch and out of Docker, and it also works to pull information from the compute nodes where that Open vSwitch information was retrieved. And that works now on mass deployed compute nodes. So that should give us even more information for diagnostic purposes. I think that's it. I think all of the rest of, I think that was all the issues. Let's switch back to the thing. I did a little bit of a Jira cleanup. So there were a bunch of old epics that didn't get, that haven't been touched for a while. So if we look here, what I did is I marked them with resolution complete. And some of these, this is actually an item that got marked incomplete, but everything else here is an epic that most likely didn't, is no longer had attention in the last couple months. If you need to bring one of these things back, change its status to to do or in progress, and it will appear again in your epic list in the backlog. Blockers for the 5.0 release. So what is a blocker? A blocker is something where you set the effective version of 5.0 and the priority to highest. So these are the items we have that are blockers for this release. Scott and Andy, I think. Andy, you want to talk about some of these?
Yes, sure. So Cord 2461, this is an issue with the changeover to the new Tosca engine. So the new Tosca engine doesn't support some Tosca features. So for example, it doesn't support uploading a file via Tosca. I don't remember the exact Tosca syntax that is used for that.
I think it was the set artifact.
Yes, the artifact, that's right. And so because of that, we can't use the same method of uploading the ONOS netconfig into XOS using Tosca. So I guess we need to either add the set artifact to the new Tosca engine or find some other way to do that.
There is another way, that is the file lookup in Ansible. Because basically what the get artifact was doing is that we were mounting that file in that container, and then the Tosca engine was reading that file and saving the content in the database. So we can directly send the content with Tosca. It is the same for
Okay.
the public keys in the services. I can point you to some examples.
Okay, so maybe I didn't understand that the file was already being mounted in the container. I thought I looked at it and that wasn't the case, but I probably misunderstand what the issue was exactly. So, okay,
Yeah,
so
so
maybe
what-
we can look at that.
What we need to do is just to put some text into the database, and we can do that via the file lookup in Ansible. We have the same exact issue with the public key in the services, so I think we can use the same solution.
Okay,
That sounds right to me, Matteo and Andy.
okay. Yeah, I'll have to keep looking at this because I guess maybe I didn't quite understand something about what was going on here.
Yeah, we can look at it together, so
Sure.
we save some time and then we can take it offline.
So by the way, are we supposed to send the network configuration to XOS?
Well, in theory.
Right, so,
Because on our guide there's written to send it to us, right?
right, because this doesn't work.
I see. So it was the case also for 4.1.
In 4.1, I
4.1
think the guide says send it to XOS. And 5.0 it
Yes.
says,
Probably only the problem in class.
Yeah, for one still had the old Tosca engine, so this was working.
So we already do this in two ways in our Jenkins files, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Or we did the same for one because both work for 4.1, so we're using the same way to help.
So now we push it to Onos, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we can revert it by pushing to XS. It's a pretty simple change. We can look at that together.
okay. Then the other thing, Core 2007 update default versions for release. I guess the issue here is just figuring out to what extent the release version is hard-coded in various files and having a method of updating that when we need to.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Scott?
Yeah, so 2551 is the example service tutorial, which is something we need to update anytime we modify how services are loaded. So the dynamic load is going to impact that. I probably need to coordinate with Matteo on that to see what the status is on the tools you're working on, Matteo, and whether we want to document that or do we want to hold off that part of the documentation update until 5.1 if the tools aren't going to be ready till 5.1.
Yeah, we can talk about that because part of the tool is ready, but given that you have to specify the service up front anyway, it doesn't make much difference.
So maybe it makes sense to leave the platform install bits of this unchanged for now, and I'll just work on updating the parts to talk about where the models go inside of the service repository, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I can point you to the platform install changes, but they will be really minimal. So
yeah, let's not introduce something if it's not going to have value to the reader at this point. So I'll probably make a pass through updating this, and then I'd like well, I'll send it to Matteo and Andy for review just so that we can all have some eyes on the example service tutorial and make sure nothing's been missed in it.
Apart from that, if we can find the time to write it, I think would be really helpful to have a description of the service API that a developer can use in a shorter format. Like where do I need to define the synchronizer image in the code repository? Where do I need to add the service in the profile? Where I can put model policies? What is the format of the service configuration, this kind of thing, just like a small guide, because I think all of us forget all the time about a step or two, but we don't want to go all the time through the tutorial that is longer if you already know what to do. I don't know if this makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The tutorial is, well, it'd be nice to have a reference to go along with the tutorial, I think would be the right way to put it. Something more concise, that if you knew what you wanted, it was easy to find it, whereas the tutorial, you kind of have to walk through it.
Yeah, I think it was the name I was looking for.
Say again, Matteo?
I think you're right, and API reference was the name I was looking for.
Yeah, reference, I think, is what we need. So, are you proposing we do that for 5.0?
I think if we can do that, that would be great. I mean, the sooner the better. I don't know if we'll have time or not, but it's something that we should definitely do sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I will create a task for next sprint, because I think, once we've hardened and we're doing the feature freeze, we should have time, for spending on documentation, hopefully.
Good.
Okay, that sounds good. I don't know what 2181 is about, but Suchitra, you aren't here. Kailash, could you follow up with them about that?
Yeah, sure, I can. I'm not able to speak about it either.
No, I don't know about the latest status, but I know it's still happening, and Suchitra is trying to reproduce. I think we requested Charles to look at this. But no. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I can send her a message to just update that. I'm sure she will. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that was all the blockers. If we go back, it doesn't look like anyone made retrospective comments. I think we got a couple of them during the thing. Does anyone have any retrospective comments about any of these epics or about the work for during the sprint?
The only thing I can say is that some of us have been pulled out from the scheduled release work for demos, but these appear to happen periodically, so I don't know what we can do to fix it. I don't know if we can do something to fix it, or even if we should do something to fix it.
I think if one of the teams commits to do something, it's their responsibility to do that something. Or if they need external help, it's their responsibility to make sure to go to management or whoever and say in time, I need this person for this period of time from the core. I know it's pure theory, but we should make it happen in practice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I agree that there should be some resource allocation. There should be some thing that happens above us at the resource allocation level that people know about and can plan for. Okay, forward looking, the Satisfying Cactus Sprint 6 starts next Monday, 2 o'clock. Some decisions we need to make is figuring out what the schedule for the hardening sprint is, when the feature freeze starts, and various other cleanup and documentation tasks that we're going to try to take on during that time, or things that happen before the freeze. So plan out what you think you're going to need to do for the next sprint. But I think sprint planning, we're probably going to have to make a bunch of decisions. And with that, I don't think we have time for a demo because it's already been an hour. Sopan, but I think you had a demo, Sopan. If you want to give that, we can stick around because we're into the stand-up time.
No, it's not in the state I wanted it to be. So maybe over Scrum sometime next week.
Okay. Well, does anyone have any other comments? If not, I'm going to end the meeting. Okay, then. I think this was really good, and I'll talk to everyone later. And I guess people who are in the scrum, let's switch over to that. Bye, all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Right.
Bye.
So was it able to someone to say?
I don't think so.
Because there was a very important thing. And
Yeah, right. Let's join in.